someone who's interested in exploring the board game world, your board game collection, or maybe you're simply exploring the South Asia Sea as you follow Admiral Zheng He in 1431 AD as you embark on the final treasure quest as you command one of the boats in his fleet and try and explore different cities to get treasure and also influence your power. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia, sharing my passion for this hobby with you, my friends, and my family. And don't forget to subscribe for more wholesome board game content. In a land where giant snails roam, the world is changing. This shall be my last voyage. Are you ready to take on the fleet? Join our crew today and explore new cities, new ports, all in the name of Admiral Zheng He in the ultimate voyage. Too close. Back up. In the ultimate voyage. Pan out. So essentially throughout the game, you're going to be controlling a set of colored ships that forms a part of Admiral Zheng He's treasure fleet. You'll be sailing across the map, you'll be visiting different places, you'll be kind of exerting some influence, you'll also be trying to gain some treasures, as well as navigating the oceans to try and, I guess, increase your prestige, but also your wealth at the same time. And I guess the basic mechanic that the game centered around is through the use of these 5 action cards. And if you've played games like Ark Nova, this kind of has a similar action selection system where there are 5 actions. They kind of get placed out in front of players from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the card that's in the 5 spot will have the highest strength. And depending on where the card is, will kind of influence how much power you can be able to execute that action for. And just like in Ark Nova, you can actually upgrade the cards to kind of spread the strength across multiple boats in your game. That's essentially the crux of the game. You're executing 3 actions per round, then you're shifting these cards into different positions, and then trying to manage the strength, which does get impacted by 3 dice that gets rolled at the beginning of every round. The sun die, the star die, and the moon die. And sometimes those values that do come up on those dice can be negative. And so if you have a card that's in the 5 position and you want to use that die, because every action card you take has to be matched with one of the 3 dice, that can kind of either strengthen the action or it can actually hinder your action, especially if it's a negative number. And so it's a game about balancing strength. It's about distributing the strength and then funneling that strength into the right actions and powering them up so that you can do the things that you want to do. Welcome to my board game room where I've got shrimp, plants, and even board games stacked right up to the ceiling behind me. So one of the actions that you can do in the game is to sail. Basically, you move your ship and the amount of strength points will determine how far you can move based on the direction of the wind. And throughout the game, there's going to be like a little storm that's going to shift from left to right across the board, which will also impact the amount of strength that you can spend if you're going, towards the east of the board or to the west of the board. If you're sailing through the storm, you'll probably have to sacrifice some porcelain or some troops to be able to get through, I guess, the harsh nature of the storm. So it really kind of not only expends your resources, but the strength that you're getting. After you're moving, you can then visit a city, and in that city, if it has not been visited before, you can roll to see what sort of influence is there, and then you get to draw an encounter card, and the encounter cards can range from a lot of different things that give you different benefits, and the encounter cards essentially give you a choice of 2 things. You can either avoid the encounter, and it kind of gives you a cheap way to get out of it, or you can actually tackle the encounter and hopefully get the reward that's associated with it. When you arrive at this new city after sailing, you roll a -2, then the city that you've arrived at is considered to be hostile, which means you are going to have to engage in mandatory combat as your next action on your turn. And so you've got to, it's kind of got this push your luck element of like, oh, I've got a small chance that this city I'm arriving at could be hostile, so I'm going to have to prepare my troops. But also, do I risk it? Do I move forward? Do I try for the encounter and get the reward? It does really tap into that theme of gaining a benefit if you take the risk, and if you don't take the risk, you're not going to advance in the game. The next action is the combat and construction card action. The construction allows you to spend 4 strength to build a structure either on the city that you're at or on your player board. If you're building a structure on the city that you're at, it actually increases your strength of future actions at that port by 2. If you build a structure on your player board, if you build a kiln, you'll be able to produce porcelain every round, and if you build a training camp, you'll be able to create more troops every round that you can use as a resource or use to perform other actions that might appear in encounters later on. If you choose to combat, you're basically comparing the strength of the port to the strength of the card plus the absolute value of the moon die. Then you get to put out some storybook markers in the region that you've combated in, and if you lose, you'll actually lose troops to porcelain, and sometimes you might cause the port to become really hostile because you've kind of incited violence in that area, which no, we don't do. We don't like that. We are peaceful people. Now, in terms of little story points, there's basically 6 regions in the game, and as you kind of gain story points for doing things in each region, it's kind of like a little race up these tracks. Whoever is the furthest up the track will gain a certain number of victory points by the end of the game, and whoever's second will gain the next set of victory points. And so you kind of want to be at the top of all of these 6 tracks. When you arrive at each port, there are particular stacks of little trade goods that you can kind of browse through and decide to buy. Now, when you use the trade action, you're going to spend your strength, acquire different goods into your ship. These goods have different pictures like animals, they might have artifacts, they give you story points for acquiring those goods from different trade regions, and they also can give you prestige points, profit knowledge, and wild knowledge tokens. The importance of these trade goods is that you can kind of collect them in particular sets, which will net you other points later on in the game. And if you upgrade your trade card, you can actually spread your strength across multiple ships and trade at multiple ports at the same time. I really like when you acquire these goods, you can kind of splay them out and go, ooh, I went to this region and saw these animals, or I went to this region and acquired these really cool craft pieces that were specific to that particular port that I went to. You know me, I love exploring. A board game store, that is. The next action that I want to talk about is the explore action. When you sail your boat to different ports, you're going to be able to spend the strength to explore certain areas to gain story points. So the more strength that you have and the more that you spend in a particular region, you're able to gain from 1 to 3 story points and advance along that track for that particular region. You can also acquire different knowledge tokens, and scattered throughout the game map are different colored transparent cubes. And the cubes actually match 4 of the 5 different action cards that you use throughout the game. I think the only one that you don't have is the explore action. And so what you can do when you collect these cubes is you can trade them in to get free actions. So you can basically trade 3 knowledge cubes of different colors to gain an objective card, one that only you can get and complete. You can also trade in 3 of the same color to upgrade a action card of that color. So I trade in 3 pink knowledge tokens. I can flip over my pink action card. I can also trade in X number of the same colored knowledge cubes to be able to increase my strength based on the number of cubes that I use to take any of the other 5 actions. But you don't get the benefit of the position of the card or the modifier of the dice rolls for the round. And so I guess these knowledge cubes give you flexibility for stretching out your strategy, increase your action power, taking other actions as a wild, increasing your value on story tracks. And I think throughout my games, I did use the explore action quite a lot at multiple ports. So the next action is all about diplomacy. Diplomacy is important in the game because it, I guess, marks your connection or your relationship with different ports around the different maps. And I guess the more relations and diplomatic you are, the better your strength and your story points are going to be. So in the game, when you use the diplomacy action, you're going to compare the strength, your total strength of the position of the card and any other added strength modifiers on top with the strength of the port. You're then going to increase your diplomacy in that location based on the difference between the two numbers. Based on the difference, you're going to be able to increase your prestige per difference. And then if the port becomes a tributary port, which means you kind of harmonized your relationship with the people there, then you're going to gain story points as well. Now you might be sitting there wondering, what on earth do we do with the troops and the porcelain that we are acquiring throughout the game? Well, the porcelain and the troops add some extra flexibility for being able to do the things that you want to achieve. For example, trading in troops and porcelain can also be used to increase your strength. That means if you're missing like 2 strength to do the thing that you need, you can trade in 3 of those resources. Vice versa, you can also trade in strength to gain resources as well. If you want to get resources that you desperately need to do certain actions, you can go, well, I've got 2 strength left over. I haven't really maximized how I've used that strength. I can transfer 2 of them to get 1 resource of my choice. You can also use scouting actions, and the scout action can use the strength that you've kind of accumulated for that turn to kind of scout in the same region or an adjacent region by looking at the top of the encounter deck, or you can examine the treasures at different ports nearby. The things that I really enjoy most about the game is the fact that this game is all centered around the historical theme, the voyage of Admiral Zheng He. Every mechanic, every design element, and every turning point in the game all hinges on how he explored, how he managed his fleet, the particular places he went to. And I think the historical theme really shines predominantly in this game, and it's a phenomenal aspect of this game's design. I think that's probably what lured me into Ultimate Voyage in the first place. The fact that not only did I like the theme of the game, but also the way it managed to express how he embarked on his voyage, and even an element of the game when you return your ships to the starting port, there's this kind of little cool area control aspect of the game where you kind of contributing to this pagoda. That kind of symbolizes you gathering the treasures and then reinvesting the money and the items that you traded for into this beautiful pagoda in the home city. And I love all those nuances in this game where, oh, I know that city, I know what it's called today, but back then this is what the name of the place was. And the second element of the game that I really enjoyed was using the cards as actions and being able to slide them up this scale and then kind of trying to work out and calculate the strength of the action based on the position of the card, but also the number of the dice roll. And the fact that you have to pair one of those dice with one action card each turn means you're thinking, well, there's a negative number there. Can I marry that with a high number, or should I really just marry that with one of my low cards so that I can just do, you know, a really small action instead? And so there's this constant balancing of like strength and using strength as a resource to determine the power of the actions and how those actions are going to really fuel your journey ahead. And just using these cards is immensely satisfying. I loved it in Ark Nova and I really like it in this game. I also like that everything that you need to know about each action is summarized on the cards, which makes it incredibly useful. The fact that you can actually upgrade your cards, and there's a little spot at the top of the card for you to put like a +1, +2 modifier that kind of is a permanent addition to the strength of your card, means that it gives you more flexibility, enhances your actions, and kind of contributes to the progression of how the strength of your action changes the more you explore the map. Now, there are a couple of things that you probably want to consider before delving into a game of Ultimate Voyage. Now, the copy that I have in front of me is actually the sample prototype copy, and I know that Leonard, the game's designer, has actually reworked the board, reworked some of the images, reworked some of the mechanics and the rules. I know that there's probably still more changes to embark, but I guess my comments are going to lie with this initial prototype version, which didn't feel as complete as it should be, but it still worked in terms of just learning how the game would operate. First of all, I found the rulebook really hard to digest. And I guess to make a comparison, I've played a lot of board and dice games where the rule books are just really clear and easy to follow. I did find the rulebook quite wordy. There was a lot of terminology that I really had to read. It did take me about 3 nights to actually power through the entire rulebook, and even then I didn't think I quite understood all of the mechanics in the rulebook. I definitely feel like the rulebook could be reworded, simplified a lot more to make it a little bit more easier to understand and comprehend, because that's the primary purpose of a rulebook, is to be able to pick up the elements of the game. I do also think that the negative values on the dice do make the complexity of the game a little bit harder, and I think if you played a lot of Euro games, it probably won't phase you a lot, but having a negative die roll and then being able to go, well, I've got a power 2 card, and how that -2 will impact the strength of that card can feel a little bit defeating. And I feel like the dice roll does add extra element of challenge, but I would probably be more hesitant to say that maybe the dice values should be changed so they all start from 0. So rather than have a -2 or a -1 on the die roll, it was really hard to comprehend what the term absolute value means. And, I did maths, 3-unit maths long time ago. I knew what absolute value meant, but having to work out the absolute value of a negative die roll just is too many mental steps for me when I'm just trying to play a fun strategic game. And so I feel like this game does have little instances where there are a lot of little niggly extra things to consider, or situational things to consider, that my brain doesn't always remember. One of the other things that I found in the game that I probably think could be improved, or is a way that would make the game feel a little bit more explorative, is that the trade tiles were very limited. And I know I played mainly at a 2-player, and I think this game definitely would play better at a 4-player count. But at a 2-player count, the limited map space that you can go to, I think we could only access 3 regions, which didn't feel wide or deep enough to be able to really fully enjoy the explorative nature of the game. So you really want to be able to have more opportunities in the game to replenish those tiles, to be able to get what you want, and then being able to explore further regions out. The upgrading of the cards is really cool, but I feel like the benefit of the upgrade and being able to split your strength across multiple ships for each of the actions is the same. Whereas in games like Ark Nova, the upgrading of the action cards actually allowed you to specialize more in that particular action. Whereas in this game, the upgrading simply allows you to spread the action across multiple boats. The other thing I found a little bit tricky is understanding the iconography. There's a lot of iconography, numerical values in this game of how you put out the little treasure tiles every certain number of rounds. There's a lot of confusing numerical elements to the game, which I think could be really alleviated if they just changed them to either symbols or using a letter system and a number system, so that it's easier to differentiate which value is the port strength and which value is the order in which you distribute the tiles when you're doing that. Because I often found that throughout my plays, I was really confused by, is that the port strength, or is that the... And so there were a couple of times where I matched my strength value and tried to exceed the numerical value of the port when it wasn't actually the port strength at all. And so there were a lot of little mishaps like that I felt I made because of that. I really love the story tracks and being able to compete across 6 multiple tracks that really makes for a great tension point. There is a storm that happens, or storm mechanic in the game, that just added some extra mental complexity that I don't think really enhanced the enjoyment of the game. So I feel like that storm element could be just added as a, if you want to use this and you're an advanced player, then use this storm element to the game, or storm mechanic. So I feel like my favorite parts of the game are the exploration, getting the trades, playing the action cards and upgrading them, getting those little knowledge cubes. Actually, I found the clear knowledge cubes incredibly satisfying, but sometimes the upkeep of those was, and a few other things in the game really kind of irked me a little bit, because once you spent the knowledge cubes, you had to put them to the side, because then when you refilled the knowledge cubes, you had to get the knowledge cubes from the side that were used earlier on, so that you wouldn't mess up the ratio of knowledge cubes that were used in the game. And so it just added that extra accounting element to the game that I didn't particularly gravitate too well towards. So what did you think of Ultimate Voyage? Are there any other board games in your collection that really evoke that exploration theme? Maybe Sleeping Gods, Sleeping God Distant Skies, or maybe Darwin's Journey? Please let me know your favorite exploration games in the comment section below. Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary review. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Also check out my Patreon page, and I hope your next board game experience is an amazing one. This is Danny signing out. See you soon. Goodbye.